Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at our Good Design Research Grant Briefing session today. My name is Victoria from Design Singapore Council, and I will be your event MC and moderator for today. Today's session is brought to you by Design Singapore Council, and it is supported by our challenge statement partners, the Lively Places Fund team from both the Urban Redevelopment Authority, URA, and the Housing Development Board, HDB. Additionally, we also have with us the Singapore Civil Defence Force, SCDF, as well as Terra Private Limited. You're probably here today because of an interest in the Good Design Research Grant. Well, you are at the right place. Apart from discovering everything that you need to know about the grant, including tips on how to put in a strong proposal, we have our challenge statement partners from URA, HDB, SCDF, and Terra here with us today. They will be sharing on their respective challenge statements. We also have the Strategic Futures team from DSG who will share on the open challenges related to the Lovable Singapore project. So here's the program that we'll be going through later. So before we kick off with an exciting lineup ahead, please allow me to highlight a couple of housekeeping rules. Firstly, if you encounter any technical issues, do not hesitate to reach out to our friendly tech team through the Zoom chat function below. And then additionally, if you have any questions at all throughout the session, please drop them, the questions, in the Zoom Q&A module below, as your audio will be on mute. When posting a question, do remember to state your name as well as company if applicable, and then indicate if your question should be addressed to any specific speaker. Without further ado, let me introduce our guest speakers along with this afternoon's program. There are many ways to apply for the GDR grant, one of which is to address a real-world challenge from our partners who will be sharing about their specific challenge statements today. Firstly, we have with us Mr. Clifford Oh-Yong. Clifford is an architect from the Urban Design West Department at URA. Secondly, we have Mr. Shafiq Ong, who coordinates innovation development in SCDF. And thirdly, we have with us Mr. Joseph Tan, founder and CEO of Terra Private Limited, a local startup that focuses on smart and sustainable solutions. Joseph will be joining us just a little shortly. Apart from addressing the challenge statement from these wonderful partners, you can also consider responding to DSG's open challenges, and my colleague, Ms. Janine Liu, will be sharing more about the challenges later. Finally, you can also consider submitting a self-initiated proposal in your application for the GDR grant. As such, I will be bringing you through these different application routes, along with some tips on putting a strong proposal together in the later part of the briefing. We will end off with time for Q&A to address any pressing queries that you might have. So do stay till the end. Now let's start off by inviting Clifford from URA to share more about LPF's challenge statement on using design and community engagement to enliven public spaces. Clifford's portfolio of work includes developing urban design guidelines for the Central, West, and North regions of Singapore, as well as projects under the URA Public Space Program, with the aim of creating a more livable and lovable public realm for all. Let's welcome him.
Thank you, Victoria, for the introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. So I'm Clifford from the Urban Redevelopment Authority, Singapore's Land Use Planning and Conservation Authority, which formulates the long-term plan and master plan to guide the physical transformation or development of Singapore. As part of today's briefing on our joint challenge statement with HDB, I will be sharing more about how and why we plan for public spaces. So the URA develops the long-term plan to guide the strategic direction of land use across the country for the next 40 to 50 years. So that's the long-term plan, which, by the way, do keep your eyes peeled. URA will be launching the exhibition summarizing the engagements and proposed long-term approaches in a couple of months. And every 5 years, we also revise the master plan, which is the detailed statutory plan that guides developments for the next 10 to 15 years. So we guide the land use like residential, open spaces, park, so on and so forth, and as well as the development intensity, which basically means how much floor area can be packed into the land parcel. So we take a long-term, comprehensive and integrated planning approach to ensure that sufficient land is safeguarded. And so Planning for public spaces is a very integral part of the planning process, and if left to the market, users with higher commercial value could price out users such as parks and open spaces. In fact, the planning of public spaces is considered upfront. We even use them to structure our city to help define the district character. So that brings to the question of what are public spaces? So here are some examples of public spaces in Singapore. You have parks, ceremonial greens, water bodies, promenades, plaza squares, urban rooms, void decks, courtyards, so on and so forth. And these spaces might be sheltered or open to sky, very green or not so green, state-owned or owned by by private developers, but they share some things in common. They are like the living rooms of our city and are places for encounters and environments for interactions. And by very definition of its name, public spaces are meant to be open and accessible to all. And in the urban planning context, they also reinforce the city's urban design, the urban pattern, and help to orientate one's movement in the city by being points of reference. So the planning, design, activation, and management of public spaces is important to us, as good public spaces foster community cohesion, provide a more livable and lovable environment, and enhance the quality of life, including our mental well-being. Creating better public spaces through community engagement can strengthen one's sense of ownership, identity, and emotional connection to the area and the space. So, making better public spaces are really an essential part of URA's planning work, and that can also be seen from our plans, such as the Parks, Water Bodies and Public Spaces plan that marks out the designated parks, water bodies, public spaces, right? And we work with agencies to provide key public spaces and also with the developers to provide public spaces within their developments. Also, many key themes in our last master plan in 2019 touch upon public spaces and community engagement. So in summary, public spaces could be improved to address P for programming, such as activities that can take place within the public space, thereby encouraging social interaction, and that could bring economic vitality to a place. L for landscaping, adding greenery can improve the physical environment and make the place more livable. A for accessibility, universal or barrier-free access is important to encourage active living. C, comfort in all senses of the word. It has to feel safe, be physically safe and comfortable, such as by providing shade and seating to contribute to the sense of comfort and well-being. E for engaging, an attractive place with delightful highlights engages the five senses and the mind, and that can be appreciated by all. S for social inclusivity, because everyone has a right to be included in public spaces, so we hope that everyone can feel a sense of belonging to the shared place. So all of this make a place. And so here's our challenge statement. How might we use design and community engagement to enliven public spaces? So we would like to encourage applicants to investigate one of or more of the following. 1. How to create an attractive, engaging, and lovable space that appeals to our senses and provides a sense of delight and comfort. 2. How to create a sense of inclusivity and encourage social bonding and mingling in public spaces. 3. How to promote flexible users or programs in public spaces. We are looking for research output that has evidence-based methodologies. The proposal should involve the physical transformation or intervention of an existing open space and should also show how communities could be brought together through activating public spaces. Quite critically, we would also like to see in the proposal how the installation, if it's built, could be easily implemented and maintained by the community members. At this point, we would like to highlight that the URA and HDB jointly run the Lively Places Fund, which is an all-year-round funding program to better support community-led efforts in enlivening Singapore's public spaces. We'd like to share that shortlisted GDR proposals that also meet the eligibility criteria for the Lively Places Fund are also eligible for additional funding from URA or HDB to implement the proposal as actual installations in public spaces. So that's the QR code which you can scan to find out more about the Lively Places Fund. But let me share with you the key points from the fund. So critically, the funding criteria for Lively Places Fund is that the implemented project has to bring communities together through activating and creating delightful public spaces. The project has to be initiated, planned, implemented, and maintained by the community members and stakeholders. The project also requires match funding from the community for at least 30% of the amount of fund applied for. For instance, if UIA or HDB is going to provide $10,000 of funding support as for the Lively Places Fund project, the community has to provide $3,000, which is 30% of $10,000, and that can be in volunteering or professional man hours, equipment, or other supplies that are meant to implement the installation. In terms of how much we are looking at up to $20,000 for an installation of at least 6 months. Therefore, the total funding for your proposal can be up to $70,000, $50,000 for the research component under good design research, and the $20,000 from UIA or HDB to stage the installation for a 6-month duration. So I'm showing the QR code to the website link again. So at this point, I'd like to share, in terms of how GDR and Lively Places Fund can go hand in hand, here is a suggested timeline. So shortlisted proposals for the GDR will have to complete the project within 12 months, right? So there's a 12-month period under GDR. During that time, the successful applicant can seek guidance or advice from UIA or HDB for the project, as we are the project sponsors. According to GDR, you have a midpoint check-in after the first 6 months, and during that time, we can start to assess the eligibility of the project for the Lively Places Fund. And at the end of the 12 months, you are supposed to submit a proof of concept for the GDR. So at that point, you and us, being UIA or HDB, can make a decision on whether to continue to implement the project in public spaces as a Lively Places Fund project, or you can leave it as a research project. So do note that the GDR proof of concept deliverable may be a prototype design, and it may not be fabricated if you so wish, or it can be other output depending on how you want to frame your research, such as frameworks or guidelines, etc. However, the Lively Places Fund deliverable, it has to be a physical installation in the public space. So that's the QR code on the screen to find out more about the eligibility, funding objectives of the Lively Places Fund and the sign-up form. So to apply for the Lively Places Fund, please submit the form that you can find via the QR code there. So HDB or UIA will walk you through what's necessary over email, or will call you. So we just need to understand what's the project, where is it located, how will the community be involved, so on and so forth. And we'll subsequently guide you along the way on the various aspects to fulfill the objectives of the Lively Places Fund. And that's typically on how to involve the community meaningfully in the project, and also the appropriate property owner or manager to engage. When the concept and the implementation approach are settled, we will inform you that we are in principle supportive of the project. And with that, you can proceed to detail the project and obtain cost estimates. With the cost estimates, then we will be able to enter a formal agreement with you, in which UIA or HDB will reimburse up to the agreed amount, which is the earlier mentioned $20,000 for a 6-month-long project. And then you can carry on to implement the project in public spaces. And with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clifford. We will now invite Shafiq from SCDF to share more about using design to strengthen SCDF's digital engagement and management of external stakeholders to build a nation of lifesavers. Prior to his current role, Shafiq had spent 3 years in frontline operations and is a pioneer of SCDF's first smart fire station at Punggol. He now coordinates innovation development in SCDF, ranging from ground-up initiatives to ops technology experimentation and proof of concepts at the organizational level. He's passionate in exploring new technologies and learning more about human-centric and data-driven designs. Over to you, Shafiq.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Hi everyone, I'm Shafiq from SCDF. Thanks again for attending the brief and thanks to Victoria for the introduction. So let me jump ahead for our presentation. All right, so basically for those who are unfamiliar with the SCDF, I hope not many of you are unfamiliar with us. We are one of the few emergency organizations globally to provide the full spectrum of emergency services of firefighting, rescue, hazardous material or hazmat mitigation, and pre-hospital emergency medical care, both on land and sea. We closely partner relevant stakeholders to formulate, implement, and enforce regulations on fire safety and civil defense shelter matters. So essentially, our ultimate mission is to protect and save lives and property for a safe and secure Singapore. So, however, we must continually adapt and evolve to meet the challenges arising from an increasingly complex operating environment. Our Transformation Vision 2025, that is the nation of lifesavers, serves to support the attainment of SCDF's mission through service excellence. So for the scope of our GDR challenge statement, which we will go through later, this brief will focus on 2 of the 3 strategic outcomes that we see on the screen. That would be the enable and empower the community and institutionalize safety and public protection. So the fact of the matter is that every day SCDF is in a battle against time to meet our mission. And while we invest in technology and innovation to level up our operational capabilities, we need to recognize and reconceptualize what we understand as resources beyond our SCDF forces to meet future demands. And this is why raising community preparedness is the foundation for building an emergency-ready nation. We need to galvanize the public to render first response to emergencies while waiting for SCDF's arrival at the incident site. To this end, we need to develop a comprehensive community outreach and public education framework that targets various segments of society. It is also equally important for us to move our services upstream through reinforcing and infusing the concept of fire safety prevention and public protection. As a pro-enterprise organization, SCDF needs to balance between regulating to improve the resilience of infrastructures to fire hazards and adopting a collaborative whole-of-community approach to fire safety to shape and internalize behaviors. So in essence, our approach is to regulate fire safety and public protection as a preventative measure, prepare the community for emergencies, and respond swiftly when an emergency does happen. Now that you have a better understanding of our transformation vision and approach, do allow me to set the stage for our challenge statement. So our current state is that with a variety of external stakeholders or customers who come with different needs and require different types of services, we face a challenge in designing a holistic and engaging experience for all. Various digital touchpoints have been developed to serve specific needs of the time. And this would mean that, however, this means that an individual may need to find and navigate multiple touch points if they seek a variety of services from SCDF. And because different departments within SCDF govern their respective service domains, this could result in inconsistent stakeholder experiences in terms of communications and branding. Here are some of our existing digital touchpoints which you could use as reference for your proposal. First, we have the My Responder mobile app, which is used to activate community first responders to nearby minor fires and cardiac arrest cases to close the gap in mitigating risks and rendering aid before SCDF's arrival. There are also public education materials and SCDF publications in the application. Next, we have our web portal, which serves general needs across different domains, such as fire safety consultation, civil defense shelters, national service matters, community emergency preparedness, and public education. We also have our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to digitally connect with the community, particularly the social media users, to bring across public education messages and insights to our operations. So there is impetus for us to design targeted and holistic engagement with our stakeholders. For this GDR call, we will focus on the emergency response and incident management ecosystem. So the very first group of stakeholders come from the community who render first response to emergencies while waiting for SCDF's arrival at the incident site. For example, we have community first responders who are activated via the My Responder mobile app to nearby minor fires and cardiac arrest cases. We also work hand in hand with community emergency and engagement committee committees, or C2Es in short, to organize community resilience days and fire safety awareness visits in the heartlands. Our volunteers include the civil defense auxiliary officers who assist us in various service domains such as public education, fire safety enforcement, and even in operational capacities such as firefighters and emergency medical technicians. We also have the AED on Wheels program, which is a collaborative effort with companies like Grab and ComfortDelGro, as well as community first responders to increase the availability of AEDs in the community. Having these life-saving AEDs on the move can help to improve a cardiac arrest victim's chances of survival. The next group of stakeholders come from our industry and commercial partners who help SCDF to reinforce the importance of safety and public protection within their companies and across the industry. First, we have the fire safety managers, or FSMs, who help to ensure and enhance the fire safety standard within their buildings. Through the FSM, fire safety activities such as tabletop exercises and physical fire drills, as well as fire prevention measures, are also implemented to promote fire safety awareness among the building occupants. We have the company emergency response teams, or CERTs, who support the FSMs and are equipped with the knowledge and skills to handle fire hazards, to mitigate the outbreak of fires, and to render first aid and CPR AED. The next subgroup would be the built environment professionals and fire safety professionals who work together to prepare building plans or propose fire safety works in any building in accordance with the regulations made under this Fire Safety Act. These are registered architects or professional engineers whom building owners can consult. In addition, these professionals help to carry out inspections of fire safety products that may be involved in their works. They would refer to the fire code, which they can access on our web portal, and they can also work closely with SCDF directly through our fire safety department. So to really sum up what I just covered in terms of the stakeholders is that we recognize this business use case to adopt a stakeholder-centric mindset across SCDF services, where we are deeply aware of a customer's end-to-end journey with us and are equipped with the tools and data to optimize their experiences with interacting with SCDF. So essentially, we are looking for experiences which should be engaging and consistent across the board. So to introduce our challenge statement, how might design strengthen SCDF's digital engagement and management of external stakeholders to build a nation of lifesavers? There are two prompts, of which the first one is how to design a digital ecosystem that harmonizes and streamlines the digital experiences of various external stakeholders as they interact with SCDF. So in other words, how might we consolidate existing and future digital touchpoints to provide a seamless experience to any user? So you should consider leveraging the existing SCDF My Responder mobile app and web portal as reference material. You may take this chance to scan the QR codes on the screen to download the My Responder app, which you can explore later on. So other than activating the community first responders, I also mentioned that there are also public education materials and SCDF publications accessible on this application. Here's the QR code for our SCDF web portal. So our web portal, just to reiterate what I shared earlier, is that it serves general needs across different domains, such as fire safety consultation, civil defense shelters, NS matters, community emergency preparedness, and public education. So the type of proposal that we're looking for, we very much welcome persona-driven and user-centric proposals that enhance the existing experiences by consolidating the different services onto a common ecosystem or platform. We are also very much looking out for creative solutions that introduce entirely new experiences and even resources for our stakeholders, perhaps to encourage self-service or even to better foster voluntary participation and compliance to regulations. Importantly, we are looking for proposals that leverage digital experiences that are harmonized and streamlined for consistency. We also have a second prompt, which is how to design a data-driven process to profile and manage a stakeholder at the individual level based on their interactions with SCDF. In other words, how might we build a holistic profile of each unique stakeholder for the respective departments to access and better understand their interactions with SCDF in terms of the end-to-end journey. So here are some things to take note. Each individual stakeholder may hold multiple identities and can act in different capacities with different needs throughout their lifetime. So here's an example. You can be a member of public who is also a community first responder who uses the My Responder mobile app, but you're also a fire safety manager in your own company. And you may have certain kind of interactions with SCDF, perhaps in terms of fire safety enforcement and operational surveys at your premises. We are also, next thing to take note of is that proposals should also consider SCDF's need to use and visualize data to harness insights to effectively further engage and activate stakeholders. So to clarify on this part, it's not so much on understanding directly the type of data that SCDF needs, but more to how we can visualize the data, perhaps in terms of dashboards, so that this can help SCDF eventually to potentially tailor content based on the unique personas and profiles of different individuals based on the data insights. So we recognize that there are many stakeholders even within the different groups. So proposals may focus on selected stakeholder segments as you wish, but must demonstrate the scalability across the wider ecosystem. So I've come to the end to our brief. We look forward to your innovative solutions to drive our movement to build a nation of lifesavers through digital experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shafiq. Next, let's invite Joseph from Terra to share about using design to address the issue of glass waste in Singapore. Joseph is the founder and CEO of Terra Private Limited, a startup that focuses on smart and sustainable solutions. He is passionate about employing smart technologies like automation and the Internet of Things for sustainable zero waste outcomes in the circular economy. Prior to Terra, Joseph held various roles at Credit Suisse, Fortis, and Standard Chartered Bank. Joseph also serves the community as a district councillor of Southwest Community Development Council. Let's hear more from him.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone has had a wonderful long weekend, and quite excited to share with you today in terms of what TerraSol does. Thanks again, Victoria, for the introduction in terms of briefly what TerraSol does. As a company, we started in 2013, and our focus is primarily on two pillars. One, which is using smart solutions. In other words, technologies like the Internet of Things, robotics and automation, to repurpose dull, dangerous jobs. So basically, using technology to enhance the way we live, the way we work, and that falls primarily under the smart pillar. Today's sharing is under our second area of focus, which is on sustainability. So we are always on the lookout for good ideas, good solutions that is able to, perhaps change the way that we live our lives to make, living on a much more sustainable basis. So before I, talk about the problem statement, I just want to give a bit of backdrop in terms of the waste landscape here in Singapore. So if you look at this pie chart in front of you, these are some of the data that we've extracted from the National Environment Agency, and it's good data that goes back some 20 years. What essentially I've put out from that data set is that you are looking at the waste that ends up in our incinerators in Singapore. So there's another group of waste which has got very high recycling rates, and they are things like construction debris, metals, rubber tires. Those get well recycled in the sense that their recycling rates are more than 90%. But these are the waste that typically have got recycling rates that are less than 90% and end up in our incinerators and consequently in our landfills. So you can see, through this simple pie chart that we have got 4 areas that contributes a significant amount of our waste that ends up in our incinerators. They are primarily food waste, paper and cardboard waste, plastics, and horticulture and wood waste. Of course, the horticulture and wood waste is a bit of an adjustment to the data from NEA because quite a number of our waste in that category is sent to waste to energy plants. In other words, we burn the horticulture and wood for energy. But if you take out the unburned portion, then you realize that mechanical recycling of that particular waste category is actually fairly low. So we still have only got some 6% of the waste in that category that's being recycled. So the percentages that you see are the actual recycling rates in all these different categories. And the figures that you see, those are the tonnage on an annual basis in terms of how much waste is actually being incinerated and consequently buried in the landfills. Now, why today's focus, and I'll share with you later on, is primarily on that little green slice that you see, which is glass. Even though its proportion as a contribution to the greater pie is relatively small, but glass in particular has a lot of interesting, should we say, characteristics that make it very challenging to tackle as a waste material. The rest, if you look at food, horticulture, paper, they are fairly organic and they will degrade on their own over time, or they get burned quite quickly. Plastics is the one that is really quite challenging because, as you know, burning of plastics releases a lot of dioxins to the environment, and that is not good. But plastics is hard to tackle because it is not homogeneous. There are many different types of plastics as indicated by the plastic numbers types that you see typically in terms of a drink bottle or a shampoo bottle. And it's not easy to tackle the plastic space. But today we're just going to focus primarily on glass. Moving on. So this is the same data, but stretched over a time series stretching back to 2003. And you can see that the amount of glass waste that is generated in Singapore is fairly consistent. They're about 70,000 tons on a per annum basis. In terms of the tonnage, it is approximately the same as electronic waste. So it's still quite a significant waste type on its own. And if you look at the recycling rates, it has sort of hovered, between 5% all the way up to about 26%. But of late, what is a bit disappointing is that the trend has been declining. So in terms of the amount of glass waste that has been recycled, we are really looking about only 10%. So of that 70,000 tons on a annual basis, you are really just talking about, perhaps 7,000 tons that is being recycled. The rest ends up in the incinerator. So what is so wrong about having glass that ends up in the incinerator? The problem is, primarily the waste to energy incinerators that we have in Singapore, they run at temperatures of between 850 to 1000 degrees Celsius. And glass as a material does not burn easily. It only liquefies at temperatures of 1400 to 1600 degrees. So you can imagine that a lot of energy is wasted on trying to burn glass, but glass doesn't burn very well. And on top of it, glass bottles on their own are fairly voluminous. It does not crumple. So in other words, a lot of the incinerator space is actually occupied by these glass bottles, which do not burn. And inside them is essentially air. So what can be better done, of course, is to see if we can actually take glass waste out of the incinerators, freeing up more space for other types of waste that are combustible. The next problem with glass, of course, is that after you've gone through all that process of trying to burn it and you buried it in the landfill, it will take about 1 to 2 million years before glass naturally degrades. So it's a very long time. And certainly, the way that we are sort of managing the glass waste stream in Singapore, I'm sure we can do better on that front. So fortunately, glass bottles can be transformed into glass sand mechanically. So there are industrial glass crushers that can reduce all these glass bottles into very fine sand granules, no different from things like beach sand, very fine quality. And of course, the sand can be reused for other purposes, which we will cover in a short while. Now, the benefit of this, of course, is we will, as a nation, require less sand if we can use some of this recycled sand that we generate organically within our borders. And this will help prevent us from degrading perhaps the natural environment of less developed countries when we import sand from those places. So there is a story from Loswell covering how Singapore's desire for sand is actually affecting the Cambodia's coastlines. Also, we are very fortunate that technology is making very quick advances, and you can see that there's a Hong Kong study that finds that glass sand can be used to replace river sand for construction purposes. So fortunately, technology is on our side, and we're starting to see innovative use of glass sand. Of course, traditionally glass sand can also be used for a lot of other, mostly industrial, but sometimes recreational purposes as well. It can be used, for example, in the top left picture, can be used to pave the roads as a component element of asphalt. On the top right picture, you can see that someone that is doing sandblasting. So glass can be used as an abrasive in terms of surface treatment of metals before you can apply a coating to the metals. Bottom left, a little bit more frivolous. You can also use the glass sand for golf courses in the bunkers, and also it can be used for the top surfing of the top dressing of the greens themselves. And of course, you can also use glass as an input component for things like cement. Yeah, so there are different uses of sand, but we are not doing enough in terms of converting the glass waste into the sand and giving it a second use of life here within Singapore itself. Now, this all may seem very challenging, very technical, and you might, kind of be daunted by what you're seeing. But I would like to share with you that, perhaps that, for the recycling of glass waste, it's not so much the knowledge that is required to do so, because there are already machines that are available. And it's certainly, not so much in terms of the scale, etc., or even for that matter, the age. So I want to play you a short video in the next slide in terms of how two teenagers in America has managed to create a glass recycling microcosm within their community. So let me try to play this video. Oops. Oh dear.
Hi, it's Megan Clausen. Devin Smith. So, as a part of our service project, we're working on bringing glass recycling to our valley. By crushing this wine bottle, we can turn it into a grit or sand product that can be reused in gardens, construction, and a lot of other projects too. So this is our first crushing, and we're gonna turn the machine on, put the bottle in, and it'll be crushed. So we just crushed our first bottle, so release that. Let's pull it out. It's all safe to touch. Crushing glass all morning, a couple hours at least, and we discovered that 44 glass wine bottles will give us about 50 pounds of sand glass product.
And a huge thanks to the Lakeland Building Supply for letting us fill and sell their sandbags at the store in downtown Manson.
Okay, so there the video gives a very simple example of how if the heart is in the right place, then you can generate microcosms where you can actually reduce the amount of waste that you generate, also reusing them by crushing it into a different material. And again, it's just the creativity that thereafter that applies in terms of what kind of products can result from the glass sand. So I do believe strongly that in Singapore, we can certainly start a movement, to get more people excited about recycling and, encouraging people to live life in a more circular manner, which will help in, resulting in a zero waste outcome for the economy and our nation as well, and our communities. So in terms of the problem statements that we would like to propose today is, essentially, we have seen that there is a more sustainable approach to managing glass waste by crushing them into safe to handle glass sand. And of course, then this sand can be used as a raw material for various inputs, whether be it industrial, whether be it recreational, and even on an individual basis. It's just the sky's the limit, and it's only limited by your creativity. Yeah. So we are hoping that designers can be encouraged to research on the following. What can we use glass sand for as a potential raw material? So this is what we are hoping that you can apply your creativity to. The proposals can explore creating eco-friendly products, solutions, which should be feasible and scalable. And also, of course, we are open to ideas in terms of how we can proliferate microcosms across Singapore that is aimed at reusing the glass waste that is generated by local communities to promote decentralized recycling. So for example, it could be a shopping mall that can put one of these machines, and then people with glass waste can come, they can crush the glass themselves into sand, and others can help themselves to the sand to bring back and do perhaps even landscaping in their gardens, etc. So this sort of microcosms we are hoping to proliferate across Singapore. So what we are looking for in terms of our problem statement and the challenge is for interesting proposals or prototypes that might help us to lessen the negative environmental impact of the current glass waste management system that we have in Singapore. And also, if you have got interesting proposals or prototypes that are cost-effective to implement and practical to end users. So that sums up the problem statement. Thank you very much for your time, and may the force be with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Now let's invite Janine, Assistant Director of Strategic and Governance in DSG, to share about the open challenges related to the Livable Singapore project. Janine and her team leads strategic planning and research projects to support DSG's twin visions of making Singapore an innovation-driven and livable city by design. This includes the Livable Singapore project, started in 2020, which is also Singapore's inaugural study that looks at the livability of a city beyond livability. Janine also drives DSG's Strategic Futures initiatives, which spotlights and sense makes the impact of emerging trends on Singapore design. Let's welcome her.
Hello, thanks Victoria. Hi, so I'm Janine. I'm here on behalf of the Livable Singapore project team to present our 3 challenge statements. So this is a multi-agency project with various public and private organizations. whilst it's led by Design Singapore, we also have partnerships with Centre for Livable Cities, Deloitte Centre for the Edge, HDB, NUS participate in design. Shout out to Larry, who's in the audience today, URA and SG together under MCCY. So Victoria kind of gave a quick background to why we're doing this, and it's linked to our Design 2025 master plan that has two key visions. One is an innovation-driven economy, and the second is a lovable city by design. So before we set out to look at how to design for lovability, we first wanted to unpack what lovability would look like in Singapore today. And this is also quite timely because a lot of people are currently talking about what lies beyond livability. So what's the next vision for Singapore? This is also of interest to many cities globally because there is a lot of research coming up that shows how lovability is also tied to strong communities, resilience, collaboration, innovation, and also could lead to building of shared common values. So this started back in 2020, and over the course of more than a year, we engaged 2,500 people across Singapore, both qualitatively and quantitatively, asking them two key questions. So the first is what's lovable about Singapore, and the second is what will make Singapore more lovable. So the first question aims to understand the enablers that drive lovability, what we want to protect, maintain, and amplify. And the second helps us to look at identifying opportunities to address gaps. So today, our three challenge statements, I think you can say is a mixture of both. We also put together a lovability framework from the data that we amassed, which looks at how people connect with their cities in 6 different ways, in a sense of inclusion, connection, attraction, attachment, agency, and freedom. And this occurs across 4 areas of the daily lived experience. So our relationship with public institutions, people and communities, our sense of our own cultures and identities, and how we relate to our built environment in places and spaces. So today we've got challenge statements around the areas of attachment, agency, and also a mixture of inclusion and connection. So first one is about how we strengthen our sense of attachment. And the challenge statement is how might we build a greater sense of attachment to Singapore, deepen our roots and tap into our social superglue that bonds us across backgrounds, ages, and ethnicities to strengthen Singapore culture and identity from ground up. So this comes from different factors that impact our sense of attachment. So through our study, we found that there are factors that enhance our sense of emotional connection, and also factors that lower them. So when it comes to sense of attachment, our respondents told us that these shared cultural, linguistic, and behavioral practices like food, Singlish, uniquely Singapore traits like being kiasu, kepo, use the tissue to chop seeds, these are what they identified most strongly with and what they felt contributed most greatly to having a sense of attachment to Singapore, because these are perceived as uniquely aspects of unique Singapore identity. There are also other factors such as our society's general acceptance of diversity, preservation of visual anchors, shared spaces, and also seeing cultural icons that elicit a sense of pride. So whilst we have, for the sake of simplicity, we presented these factors as a list, I think you probably also noticed that there are overlaps. Maybe one factor impacts another. So anyone who wants to respond to this challenge statement can choose to focus on one or even a combination of factors. So on the flip side, what lowers our sense of attachment is when we lose our visual and cultural anchors, especially pertaining to our built environment, when we don't identify certain aspects of Singapore behavior, when we perceive that there is a lack of authenticity, especially in the built environment. So what we're looking for would be design proposals that explore opportunities that strengthens and builds on existing elements that are already identified as strong enablers of attachment, such as the social glue, ways to embed local culture into everyday experiences, and ways to explore, ways to enhance and embrace new cultures that are coming into Singapore. The second challenge statement is around addressing areas that affect our sense of agency, particularly in shared spaces. So how might we enhance people's stake in places and spaces and equip them with a sense of agency to develop these places and spaces? So we have found that our sense of agency in Singapore is enhanced through these areas. I just want to focus a little bit on the first one, which is this, which is what we found from our respondents. There's already a strong baseline, a strong commitment to a social contract of shared responsibility in making public spaces and interactions safe and pleasant for all. So we found that the majority of our respondents agreed very strongly that everyone has a part to play in this area. So perhaps this is one area that could be further enhanced through design intervention. Others are also opportunities to co-create and shape shared spaces, especially in residential neighborhoods. And also we found that opportunities to contribute to social causes came up very strongly as a result of the pandemic. It definitely built more avenues for people to get involved in donating, volunteering, etc. The last is when there's a good two-way relationship between public institutions and residents, which empowers residents to express opinions and co-create solutions. On the flip side, this is lowered when we feel disempowered, overwhelmed with regulations that we do not know how to navigate, when we perceive that we lack knowledge, skills, and tools to enact change, or when we encounter apathetic attitudes in other people. So when we polled our respondents, we found that 33% actually agree that they feel they can make an impact on their neighborhood or in their community issues. Interestingly, almost half neither agree nor disagree, and about 20% disagree. So we're hoping through this challenge statement we can unpack the why 48% are on the fence, or perhaps address the gaps felt by this 20%. Hence, we're looking for design proposals that run research at precinct or neighborhood levels on how to reduce barriers to co-creation, and also explore capability building in residents for ground-up engagement. And this could even take the form of building frameworks or a playbook. So the final challenge statement is around strengthening inclusion and connection. And the challenge statement is how might we design for a more equitable society that promotes a softer definition of success, and how might we further expand our values of multiculturalism, diversity, and inclusivity to fit the growing needs of emerging groups. So what we found is the sense of inclusion and connection is enhanced through strong micro-communities, informal networks that exchange care, support, and resources, especially so in neighborhoods. Our shared cultural and linguistic practices, feeling welcome, accepted, and able to partake in civic life, especially in public spaces that feel welcoming to everybody, and where you feel you feel that you can linger there and spend a long time there without being rushed to leave. The fourth one is something that we wanted to highlight a little, to spotlight. We felt like that there could be design opportunities here. So this is public spaces or activities that nurture or encourage interactions with people outside our social circle. So we got a lot of very impactful responses from our study participants about how unplanned, spontaneous, or surprising interactions with people in public spaces that they may normally never interact with played a very big role in how they felt about Singapore's lovability. And then on the flip side, in the interest of time, I'll just focus on the first two. This would be when the pace of life feels stressful or competitive, leading to unfriendly, unpleasant public behavior, and also leading to shared spaces that do not feel welcoming for everyone. So we're looking for designers to investigate how we can enhance inclusiveness, including social infrastructure that encourages spontaneous interactions or encounters, how we can reframe or redefine diversity to update our understanding of inclusiveness, especially as society becomes more sophisticated and diverse. So underpinning all of this is our belief that livable cities are dynamic, human, and resilient, and we look forward to receiving your questions or inputs or responses. You can connect with us through this email over here. And yeah, thank you. Looking forward.
Thank you so much, Janine. Okay, now let me share my screen as well, and I can take you through how you can better submit a GDR proposal. I hope my screen is showing up properly. Okay, let me start then. So if you're keen to, thank you to all our partners as well as the SF team for going through their challenge statements as well as the open challenges. And if you are keen to apply for GDR, here are the 3 different types of proposals that you can actually put in. So the first one is to actually take on a challenge statement, which is a real-world design challenge that you have just heard about. Alternatively, you can respond to our open challenges, which Janine has also just shared on. And lastly, you can actually submit a self-initiated proposal if you already have a research area that you want to look into and you already have it in mind. So these are the 3 types of proposals. And then in terms of the types of support that you can receive if you are selected for the grant support eventually, firstly, it is the seed funding of up to $50,000 to kickstart your research project, and it is co-funding support of up to 70% of the actual cost, capped at $50,000. So that's just a note to take note of. And it's for qualifying items, so which I will touch on in the next slide. Other than seed funding, you also do get mentorship guidance from industry experts, publicity and capability development support, like media training, for example. And on top of that, there could also be potential business opportunities arising from responding to challenge statement partners. Additionally, there is cross-industry collaborations potentially with our resource partners, which includes like prototyping labs, new material labs, or even artisanal crafts. And finally, at the end of your research projects, there are showcase opportunities. DSG is very active on social media and will definitely publicize about your research project. And you may also have the chance to have in-person showcases, for example, at Gardens by the Bay. In terms of qualifying cost items, there are 5 types, and they are mainly material costs, which are materials required for the research or the proof of concept development. Secondly is third-party costs, which is like external consultants, external manpower costs that's required for your research and proof of concept. It also includes, say, project documentation as part of proof of concept. Thirdly, there is external venue rental costs, and this is for should you need to rent out venue to conduct meetings, interviews, workshops as part of your research, that will come under that. Fourthly, equipment and software costs, and this covers subscription, purchase, rental, etc. They are required. And lastly, if you're an enterprise and you're applying, then we do cover internal manpower costs, but it is prorated. It's the basic salary, prorated based on the time spent on the project by the employee. It is also capped to the lower of $10,000 or 20% of the total actual qualifying costs. Then in terms of our evaluation panel, the ones who will evaluate the proposals received and select those who are finally supported by the grant, it consists of the permanent panel with this four, Dulisha, Executive Director of Deloitte Center for the Aged Asia, Chia Hui, Head of Design for Philips ASEAN Pacific, as well as Head of Government and Public Affairs for Philips Singapore, Yi Xiang, Head of Pillar Architecture and Sustainable Design at SUTD, and finally, Christina, who brings with her a wealth of luxury retail experience and industry knowledge. Additionally, we do also have the rotating panel consisting of Simon, CEO of TEF, as well as Chris, founder and creative director of Asylum. These are actually industry subject experts who will give their comments as well as input to support the permanent panel's decisions. So then what is applied design research? So we encourage applying designers to really look into practice-based research that explores one or three of the following areas below, one being systems and processes, second being identity and culture, as well as third being new technologies. New technologies can be both digital and material. And if you look to the right, we have some examples of the types of projects we had so far, and it ranges from designing community playgrounds of the future, all the way to the other end of redesigning timber construction to be more sustainable. Secondly, at the end of the project, designers should be working towards a proof of concept. And the proof of concept is not necessarily a product per se. It can also be, say, prototypes of models, tools, a framework, a guidebook. So the proof of concept can take many forms, but it should definitely demonstrate that you have gone deep into your research, and also that the proof of concept has wide applications across the industries and even beyond Singapore. So now is a guide for how you can put in a strong proposal. This can also be found in our FAQ found in the application kit on our website. The QR code is on the top right corner. So firstly, summarize your research concept and objectives. And the example is, for example, this proposal looks at the viability of deploying an existing reconstituted material that can be molded into prefabricated building elements, for example. Secondly, do state how your project contributes to the impact areas while addressing global challenges. So for example, your project could contribute to enabling economic transformation. And it aims to show, say, with business model built on superior system and technology, how Singapore can benefit, etc. Thirdly, do outline the intended outputs for your project's proof of concept. So for example, your proof of concept is aiming to have this concept as a floor slab on wall panel to showcase the strength, constructability, and the cost efficiency, for example. Fourthly, you can explain your plans to further develop and publicize the completed project. This could include, say, you plan to reach out to other parties, you plan to collaborate with other industry experts or industry leaders, or say you want to publish it on your social platform to gather more reach in the future. And lastly, please state how the project strengthens your unique value proposition. So for example, it could be establishing your firm's thought leadership in a particular area, or so so these 5 guidelines we hope will help you better guide your proposal preparation. In terms of eligibility criteria, the GDL grant is eligible for practicing designers with more than 3 years of working experience, or enterprises that have been incorporated in Singapore for more than 3 years. The lead applicant should be either a Singapore citizen or a permanent resident. In terms of the evaluation criteria, these are the 5 main categories. In terms of strength of proposal, the design impact, the unique value proposition, how it strengthens your enterprise or your personal unique value proposition, your track record, which is actually a portfolio of work within the last 3 years, and finally the design ethos. So in terms of timeline, I'm sure most of you will know it has already launched last Monday, and the application period will actually go on for 6 weeks, ending on 3rd June 2022. 6 p.m. to be exact. And then after the application period closes, the evaluation will go on for about 6 weeks. And if you are shortlisted, you will be notified to give a more detailed presentation at the final evaluation session to the evaluation panel that was mentioned earlier. And then if at the end of it, you are finally selected for grant support, there will be a paperwork period and signing of agreements for about 5 weeks, and then the project will commence. It's up to 12 months. If you are able to actually finish your project earlier than 12 months and complete your proof of concept, that is fine as well. But in any case, there will be a midpoint check-in with a presentation, as well as a final presentation at the end when you have completed your proof of concept. Okay, and So I've come to the end of my presentation, and these are the contacts. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And these are also the QR codes that you can scan, which I'll leave it up momentarily. And then, so finally, we want to give our audience a chance to engage and ask questions, especially if there are questions about the challenge statements shared today. Can I invite the speakers to turn on their videos as we take some questions from the audience? Okay, great. Let me just take a look at the Q&A section so far. Okay, so there is a question that is to all panelists. How would you measure the impact of such design research projects? And maybe you can kickstart with Clifford.
Hi, thanks, Victoria. In terms of measuring the KPIs, we want to see that because our project is specifically for public spaces, we want to see that, for example, there's improved footfall, or you could do user surveys to show that people are more satisfied with the area after you have implemented the project. I think it can be kept fairly broad, but we want to see a tangible improvement, which you have to measure. I hope that clarifies.
Okay, then maybe next we can ask Shafiq for your thoughts.
Yeah, okay. So I think for SCDF's challenge statement, in terms of measuring the impact, what the proposal could include are plans to, say, conduct user research, even running usability tests with our existing touch points. And subsequently, how would your potential proof of concept or prototype, what are the plans to also conduct usability tests for those prototypes? And subsequently, the impact would be whether there's going to be any significant improvement between the existing experiences as well as the future. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Shafiq. Over to you, Joe.
Hello, thanks everyone. I guess for us the project is fairly straightforward because we are using a raw material, which is glass sand, to generate prototypes or products. And in that sense, every grain of sand that is converted into a product is a grain of sand that is kept out of the landfill. So we can measure in terms of how much actual tonnage, the product after you have done the prototype, and subsequently as well, project out as well in terms of the impact on the recycling rates of glass waste in Singapore, and how much we can actually keep out the landfill. That's a very straightforward way of measuring it. But another way to measure the KPIs, if you will, it's also the impact in terms of the touch points. How much of the community have we managed to conduct the outreach to? How many people, and then in the sense how many people are coming on board into this campaign, or perhaps even made aware that they can use glass sand in so many different ways. So another way to measure the impact, of course, is how many touch points we have been able to engage throughout the period of the project.
Thank you so much, Joe. Janine, do you have anything to add on?
Hello. So I think this is a really great question. It's also something that we found quite an interesting challenge when we first set up this project, because it's quite intangible, right? How do you measure the increased lovability of a place? So if anyone wants to respond to our challenge statements, I think a good way to look at the impact of your design or your intervention would be to perhaps base it on the data that we will share with you on various indicators that we have polled the public on, and to see whether there's the needle has moved after the intervention. So that could be one way. Another way is if you want to set up your own parameters and devote some of the resources to running your own survey pre-intervention, that could be a possibility as well.
Thank you so much, Janine. Okay, then maybe we can go straight into a couple more questions for Janine. From Sanaya, she's actually asking how will the final design or research output be used further down the line? For instance, is there an opportunity for a government agency to pick this up and scale up on the prototype later on?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's a really great question. To add some context to the Lovable Singapore study, we're actually socializing our findings with various public agencies at the moment, because we found that across the breadth of findings that we derived from the data, there are certain things that are perhaps more policy driven, things that can only be answered or addressed by public agencies. Whereas on the other hand, there are others that we felt were more would be more impactful if they came from ground up rather than top down. So these are the ones that we have selected for this round of challenge statements. So we are hoping that this would spark off a more ground up response to the questions that have been put forward. So if there is an opportunity for a pilot to be further scaled up, we will also be able to put the designers in touch with the relevant partner agency to see if they want to take it up or further scale it beyond this project. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Jenny. And one more hot on the heels for you. So
yes.
So will the designer have access to the report from the past round of research beyond what is available on the website currently?
Yes, definitely. So the reason why we haven't put the full report on the website is because some areas are still, being looked at by various public agencies. But for the purpose of answering these challenge statements, we will make available the data behind the insights that were shared as much as possible. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Janine. Okay, thank you all also for all the questions that we have been receiving. Some of them my colleagues will be replying to you directly. But in the meantime, Shafiq, we have a question for you. Would it be acceptable to submit a proposal that only addresses a part of your challenge statement? For example, responding to SCDF's first half of the challenge on digital ecosystem, but not the data-driven process to profile and manage stakeholders?
Sure. Okay. So yeah, thanks for the question, Victoria. So I think it's acceptable. It's acceptable to answer just the first prompt and not the second or the other way around. But perhaps to clarify how we have crafted the challenge statement, is really the first prompt focuses on, once we have consolidated the various digital touch points, how are we able to sort of track and monitor the interactions that various stakeholders have with SCDF? Subsequently, that information would help us would potentially help you in coming up with the proposal for the second prompt, because once we know the different touch points and what type of interactions, the number of hits, for example, then that data is already being tracked. So how would that data be easily accessible and visualized for SCDF to sort of glean some insights, right? And then make data-driven decisions behind the scenes. And then it becomes a cyclical kind of process where those insights would also inform us how we can better improve those touch points or services that we have for the different stakeholders. So I hope that sort of clarifies the intention of breaking into two different sub-prompts, because we are really looking at a holistic experience from end to end. Yeah, so but of course, we are okay with proposals that focus mainly perhaps on the first part. But if you are able to have a proposal that answers both prompts, that would be of advantage to you.
Thank you so much, Shafiq. And next, maybe for Joe, we would like to invite you to expand a bit more on your response to Sanaya from Quantum Consumer Solutions regarding conducting the research through a more behavioral change lens.
Okay, thanks, Victoria, for the question, and thanks, Sanaya, for the question. In terms of the short answer, of course, is yes. It is definitely something that you can tackle from the behavioral lens standpoint, because we are doing something that we're starting something that is fresh and has never been done before in Singapore in terms of trying to create these small little communities all around Singapore where we can do decentralized recycling. So certainly quite a fair bit of the work, would require reaching out to the different stakeholders. And I'll give you an example, like for example, Launchpad. There is a bar over there, a pub called Timber. And you can essentially work with the people there and say about putting a glass crusher there, getting the glass in, and then letting the community use the glass end freely, so people who live around the area can pick up the glass end for various purposes. So certainly there is scope to look at things from a behavioral lens to see how you might be able to encourage and essentially light the fire in the community, in their hearts, so that they will all be charged up to participate. And this is definitely one of the challenge statements that we're putting forth as well, in terms of how can we proliferate microcosms, but also not just in terms of looking at the behavioral change, but also process changes as well. How can we change the way that we do things? For example, currently almost all the glass waste is collected by public waste collectors. How about we engage some of the agency members like NEA perhaps to try to do a bit of a sandbox, a playground, so that we can try to do things a bit differently. So there is also a need to put on the good thinking hat and to see if we can tackle things differently via a process change. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Joe. There have been a couple of questions that have been asked in the chat box, and I believe all the answers have been posted to them. If anybody has any other clarifications that you might want to let us know in the Q&A chat, and we will keep this channel open for a little bit or further to see if anybody has any more questions. I believe we have just gotten a comment from, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Sovere, that to Joe. So most application that uses glass can already are replaced by plastics, and the point that you raised that plastics are diverse. Joe, I hope you're able to see the comment as well, so that it's easier for you to read through while I read it out. So I managed to process unsorted waste plastics into slabs and rods to eliminate wood and paper. A seminar was organized by MIT alumni for petrochemicals capital, Houston, and that was held. So glass may make small contribution, and zero plastic waste can make Singapore lead the world, is the comment by Sovere, which I hope I got your name correct. So Joe, if you have anything that you would like to add on to this comment, and do let us know.
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. I think it's, I hope I pronounced it correctly as well. You're absolutely right. We are dealing with a huge plastic problem that is, almost 1 million tons on an annual basis. For the scale of this, problem, I think it's just a little bit out of reach for, this particular challenge, which is why we have chosen to put forward something that is more manageable. Baby steps first. But, we are also very interested in trying to solve the plastics problem in Singapore. And, by all means, please reach out to me. More than happy to have a chat with you in terms of how we can, together perhaps make a meaningful impact on, the plastic waste problem here in Singapore.
Okay, great. And of course, if anybody has any questions that you would like to specifically direct to any of our partners today, their contacts can actually be found on our website under the challenge statement web page, and you can reach out to them directly through email. So feel free to do so. So as I am a little bit conscious of time, let me just share my screen with the contact details for DSG, and feel free to reach out to any of us. And there's also the QR codes that you can scan for more information. We are very quickly approaching the end of the Q&A session. So I would like to thank all the speakers that have been here with us today for the very engaging conversation. And again, if you have any further questions on the challenge statement, feel free to reach out to them directly. So with this, the briefing session is actually coming to an end, and we hope that today's sharing has actually inspired you to consider pursuing impactful design research in your practice. Applications are open now and will be closing on 3rd June 2022, 6 p.m. to be exact. So feel free to reach out to us, and if you have any further questions about the grant or even to share about the proposals you have in mind, we're happy to jump on a quick call. Thank you again for your interest in GDR and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you, everyone.